Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Schlumberger. Behind me here today is a 1932 Ford three-window coupe, also known as a deuce coupe. This is a car built by my late grandfather, Willie Eibner, also from New Ulm, Minnesota. This is a true hot rod built from blood, sweat, and tears, ingenuity, and whatever parts and tools he could find at the time. I've never come across a car with so much documented history as this car, and I'm fortunate enough to own the hot rod today and to tell the story of the car to today's generation. So come along for a ride with me today and listen to the words as written by the car's builder and my grandfather, Willie Eibner. The story of this car is man builds car, man sells car, and man buys car back again. So my grandfather built the car in 1954, he sold it in 1958, and later in 1987 he had an opportunity to buy the car back again. So in 1987 he bought the car back and rebuilt the car in 2007. Roadsters is an old street rod club out of New Ulm, Minnesota, and Willie Eibner was one of the founders of Roadsters. What you see here is an original sketch of the Roadsters plate that would later be turned into a cast iron plate to go on hot rods. The cast iron plate differs a little bit. They weren't able to cast some of the detail from the sketch into the iron, so some of the detail was removed, but the sketch very much mimics the cast iron Roadsters plates, as this was the original logo here. Here's a few of the original programs from the various car shows that Willie entered the hot rod in. This one happens to be from the Des Moines, Iowa show. Here's a copy of Hot Rod magazine, January of 1958. The hot rod was featured in this magazine here. Can't imagine what it was like to be a reader of Hot Rod magazine, working hard to build your own hot rod, and later have a feature in the magazine of your car. He was very proud of this, and it's a big piece of history with the hot rod today. My wife Danielle and I got married on June 9th, 2012, and really had the hot rod there for our wedding day. We were able to get a few pictures of us in the car, along with my Grandpa Willie in the car too as well. So like I said, this is a true hot rod. Rides like one too. It's got all the componentry, the original build in '54. Wide-head V8, open headers now, 3 on the tree. Now I'm reading from sheets today because, as I stated earlier, these are words written right from the hot rod's builder. At the age of 18, I got the hot rod bug. After 3 years of reading hot rod magazines and planning, my dreams began to come reality. I wanted my rod to be good and sturdy so that it could be used for traveling and also for an outstanding show car, as well as a good competition on drag strips. The first thing I began looking for was a 32 Ford three-window coupe. I found a three-window deuce in a ravine that at one time had been used for jalopy racing. It was sure banged up. The only thing that was left of it was the body and the frame. I asked the owner what he wanted for it, and he said he could have it for $2.50. I asked no more questions. The next day I hauled it home. When my parents saw it, they almost hit the ceiling. They said, "You'll never make a car of that piece of junk." The first thing I did was to completely strip the interior and remove the body from the frame. Then I noticed the frame was in poor condition. I figured that the next best thing to do was find a chassis from another car. After many weeks of hunting for a wrecked car that would not cost too much, I came across a wrecked 46 Mercury, which cost me $25. I pulled it home, and this is when my parents really hit the ceiling. My dad said, "What are you going to do with that wreck?" I told him I was going to use it for parts and to build a rod. He commented that I'd like to see it. To which I replied, "Just give me time. I'll prove I can do it." The next step, I removed the Mercury body from the chassis. Due to the fact that this car had been in a wreck, the frame was badly bent, so I decided it would be cheaper to buy another frame. I located yet another 46 Mercury frame in a junkyard which I purchased for $20. This was placed on blocks in my shop. The 32 Ford Coupe body was temporarily positioned on top of the wrecked Mercury chassis in the desired location. From this temporary setup, I was able to make exact measurements as to proceed to alter the second frame. I saved a great deal of time and effort by this setup, as I could work on the frame without placing and removing the body to get exact fitment. The Mercury frame had to be completely rebuilt in order to fit the 32 Ford body. The frame was narrowed 4 inches from the motor on back, Z'd 4 inches in the rear, and the wheelbase shortened 18 inches, which gives it a 100-inch wheelbase. In all, the frame was cut in 18 different places. The front axle from the 46 Mercury was cut and dropped 2 inches. I saved $10 by having my own axle cut and dropped. The rear-ended transmission is also from the Mercury. All the wheel rims, which were 15-inch, were rebuilt to give a greater offset and ample wheel-to-body clearance. Wheel spacers were also made for the rear wheels. As a result, I have a 65-inch wheel tread in the front and a 69-inch wheel tread in the rear. It has 6.7 by 15-inch Firestone nylon cord tubeless white wall skins. Tubular shock absorbers were installed in place of the old style shocks. The drive shaft housing was shortened 18 inches and a new drive shaft was machined. A special gas tank was fabricated from sheet metal to fit between the frame. At the same time, I maintained a 19-gallon capacity. The tank was undercoated before installation. The steering column, which also was from the 46 Mercury, was tilted down and slanted slightly inward in order to compensate for the lower and narrower body. A bracket was then built and welded to the rear crossmember of the frame for the spare tire. It was constructed so that the spare would lay in the trunk compartment. I now proceeded to work on the body. The complete floor and firewall were removed and discarded. The body was placed on the chassis and blocked from the floor at the desired channeling depth of 7 inches. Several body mounts were now made and welded to the body. Finally securing the body to the frame, the floor, firewall, and partition between the trunk and the cab was fabricated from sheet metal and welded in position. The exterior side of the firewall was covered with a chrome-plated sheet metal. There is nothing mounted to or going through the firewall except throttle linkage. This gives my mill compartment a neat appearance. I now removed the body from the chassis. The underside of the body was undercoated. The chassis was rechecked for alignment by a professional mechanic. He was amazed to find it perfect. It was then cleaned, primed, and painted red. The body was reset on the chassis and bolted into place using rubber cushioning. For my mill, I used a Ford Flathead V8 59A block, which I had overhauled and mildly souped at my garage. It was bored to 3 3/8 inches and has a Mercury crankshaft which gives it 4-inch stroke and 286 cubic inches. It was given the usual port and relief job. Lincoln valve springs were also installed. The block was cleaned, primed, and painted gold. The mill was equipped with an Edelbrock 9.5:1 heads and dual manifold. The best exhaust headers to use for my rod were W-type over the frame. The header on the port side had to be rebuilt slightly to allow room for the steering column. The mill was now installed and in place. The exhaust extensions had to be specifically made from 2.5-inch tubing to go around the frame. Removable plugs were provided in the extensions to bypass the mufflers for racing. I located a 32 radiator shell in a junkyard and purchased it for $2. It had to be sectioned 2 inches and was bullnosed. Grill styling was accomplished by using 1/4 inch cold rolled steel rod placed vertically, about 3/4 of an inch apart in a hoop, which was made to fit the shell. I was still in need of a radiator. After several weeks of combing the countryside, I finally located a completely demolished 32 Ford which had the remains of its radiator. The tank and framework were the only usable parts. I took the radiator to a shop where they installed a new heavy-duty core and did other rebuilding on the water inlets and outlets to my specifications. The core had to be specifically ordered from the factory to get the desired size. The motorcycle type fenders were made from 2 spare tire wheel covers. These tire covers cost me $2 and were from Ford station wagons. The covers were cut in half and slightly reshaped. They were fastened to the backing plates by means of 2 3/4-inch rods. Each fender can easily be removed by taking off 4 nuts. The fenders are strong enough to support the weight of a grown man. To construct the dash, I used the top curve of the deuce dash and welded a section of sheet metal to it. To keep the cost of my rod as low as possible, I used the instruments from the 46 Mercury. The next thing I made for my rod was the tail pan. This tail pan serves 2 purposes. First, it gives a belly pan effect, and second, it houses my battery. The nerfing bars are made from 3/4-inch cold-rolled steel rods. Provision was made for the nerfing bars for a license plate and taillights. The taillights were placed in the rear bars because state law requires that taillights be within 8 inches of the outside of the car. The nerfing bars were then chrome plated and bolted to the frame. I used Model A headlamps because of the parking light on top of them. They were secured to the frame by means of cast aluminum and polished brackets. After completion of the electrical system, my rod was now ready for a test run. I thought the day would never come when I could actually jump in and squeal off. It sure ran good and handled well. I then took it to the body shop and told them what body work I wanted done and how. They began by removing the dents which were over the entire body. Next, the solid metal top was cut from another car and welded in place, giving my street coupe a one-piece solid metal top. The next thing was to shave the turtle deck and French in the air vent. After this, the top, tail pan, and extractor were loaded in. I helped them quite a bit with the filling and sanding of the body. It was now given a few coats of primer paint. It sure began looking like a rod now. I drove my rod home for the fabrication and fitting of the upholstery. I designed and sewed the upholstery from black and white rawhide. The sides, back, and seats were covered with white pleats and black rolls. Padded with foam rubber, I used bucket seats from a cab-over international truck. They were just the correct size and worked out perfectly. The driver's seat is adjustable. The headliner was next on the list. It was made from black and white onboard calf skin. I covered the floor with bright red rug. The material for the interior cost me approximately $110. I did all the cutting and sewing of the upholstery myself. The local leather shop let me use their sewing machine. My rod now went back to the body shop to get the finished paint job. Several more primer coats were added and then sanded. My favorite car color is black, so that was the color I selected. Approximately 10 coats of paint were applied. Each coat was sanded by hand and the last rubbed out. It shines like $1 million. I then made the final installation of the upholstery. Finally, my rod was completed. It sure felt good to clutch up and down Main Street in it. The majority of the people around here have never seen a rod before. The only ones they have seen were short rods. They sure appreciated to see a real street rod. I started to build the rod in August of 1954 and completed it in April 1955. My street coupe was now finished and was ready for display at the auto shows. It cost me approximately $1,800 to build. So far I've had my rod in 5 different auto shows. The first show was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota Motorcade, July 8th to 10th, 1955. At this show I was awarded first place in the hot rod division. The second show was at Green Bay, Wisconsin Motorcade, July 28th through 31st in 1955. At Green Bay I really hit the jackpot. The participants voted my car as the most beautiful car of the show. I received 2 trophies. One was received for first place as the most beautiful car of the show. The second was received for first place in the hot rod division. The third show I attended was at Duluth, Minnesota Motorcade, August 12th through 14th, 1955. Here I received first place in the hot rod division and just missed the grand award for the most beautiful car in the show by 9 votes. The fourth show was at Wichita, Kansas Motorcade, October 14th through 16th of 1955. I again received first place in the hot rod division. The fifth and last show I entered in 1955 was at Omaha, Nebraska, where the first Midwest Adorama show was held November 18th to 20th. Here I received second place in the hot rod division. The judges told me that I would have won first if I had not neglected to clean the trunk compartment. I drove my rod to all of the shows that I entered. The greatest distance traveled to enter a show was 600 miles, and that was the show in Wichita, Kansas.